All right, guys, welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. So, joining us today is Zane Griggs, a 25-year veteran in metabolic health, fitness coaching, and author of Kicking Ass After 50. He's the brain behind the Fit Over 40 framework and free guide, How to Build Muscle After 40. As host of the Healthy After 50 podcast, Zane coaches professionals over 40 to build muscle, boost energy, and maintain longevity using practical, low carb aligned strategies that are smart, sustainable, and effective. So, Zane, man, it's great to finally meet you. Great to have you on here. Excited for jumping into everything with you.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate the invitation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe before we get into everything health, fitness, wellness, nutrition related, could you give the listeners just a real brief background on yourself and maybe, why you went this specific health and fitness route with your personal life?
Wow. Well, yeah, I was going back a ways. Man, back to my mid-20s. So back in the 90s, I saw several of my older relatives, mostly my dad's brothers, struggling with heart disease. One of them had diabetes, just had different health issues, most of them related to metabolic health. And saw that on my mom's side too, but I saw a distinct pattern with my dad's older brother struggling with this, but he was always like watching his diet, as well as we knew back then, the 70s and 80s. And at that point, and exercising, he'd always been like, running, hitting the gym. And I thought, okay, there's something here. There's something to this. Like, I don't want to end up struggling with these metabolic health issues in my 60s and 70s, like my uncles are. What can I do to avoid this? And so I just started experimenting at an early age. I mean, seriously, mid-20s, this became a kind of point of curiosity for me where I would just experiment. I was vegetarian for 3.5 years. I was reading books and experimenting and talking to people, trying new things. That kind of didn't end well for me, but I learned a lot from it. And then started moving into, I decided I wanted to get into personal training, helping other people to do this so I could kind of continue my own curiosity, my own curious journey into health and avoiding metabolic disease. And that really kicked off in 98 when I became a trainer and just kept experimenting. I've been experimenting ever since, and I continue to make changes to my diet, different things with exercise, but and continuing to learn and read and listen to other people. So I would definitely say it's been a journey of learning and experimentation and failure and learning from all of that for the last probably 30, almost 35 years. So it's that's basically what what got me here. Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting when you say experimenting too, because I've been thinking a lot about just my own personal like health, wellness journey, and diet and working out over the years, and I think that's really the key here that people need to kind of embrace is like you're not gonna be on the same diet or the same workout program for the entirety of your life.
mm,
Some diets will work, you'll have to switch things up. You're constantly aging, your cells are turning over, the body that you have at 40 wasn't the same body at 35, and that wasn't the same body at 30. Like,
right.
I think that's what people need to embrace is
Yeah.
the experimentation and being curious around trying new things, being willing to kind of jump into new things that they maybe haven't tried. And through that, I think you kind of find what is ultimately working. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like that's kind of how you're essentially going about things.
Yes, and we have a tendency to get stuck. Like if something works at first or something works well, we tend to like get a little too attached sometimes to a certain method.
Oh, of course.
And our the thing is, our bodies are constantly changing and adapting. It's not just age. Whatever you put in front of it, it will try to adapt to. And it's that process of trying to achieve homeostasis that really can take what initially might turn out to be or start off to be a great strategy or tool. Okay, I'm talking about a diet or an approach,
Hmm.
whatever it is you're doing. And initially the benefit or the benefits you receive are from the change. And so there's that kind of that, the system like, oh, we got to adjust here. We got to make some changes to adjust to this new stimulus. But over time, our body gets really good at adapting, and that adaptation process can take you to a point where you lose some of those initial benefits
Mm,
and you start incurring some downside, some negative consequences of your body adapting. And that usually starts with hormonal changes, which then lead into, things like thyroid, sex hormones, um, just how, your body's response. And so most strategies that elicit some sort of immediate response or change, they're limiting something, right? They're limiting a particular factor, whether
mm,
that's like vegetarian and vegan diet, you're eliminating animal foods. With the low fat diet, you're obviously limiting or greatly diminishing fat. Low carb and keto and carnivore, all these you're eliminating or reducing carbohydrates. And so again, there's a shift in energy, right?
mhm,
Where your energy source is coming from, or whatever those nutrients are, your body has to change. And that initial change is like, oh, we got to scramble here. And so you might see some benefit moving in a certain direction. But then as your body adapts to that, what happens is the effectiveness of that change isn't isn't the same. So there's an effect, but it's not the
mhm.
same effect because your body starts to adapt to it. Hormones have shifted, and how your body uses and metabolizes energy may have shifted. And the problem is we think that these positive effects or we have a tendency, as I did, because I'd hang on to some of them a little too long, that
Sure.
these are going to last forever. Like this is a great effect. This is wonderful. I found it. I have found the magical diet that's going to take me into health for the rest of my life. And that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Now, if you want to make some subtle changes, or I'd say subtle changes, you want to make some common sense changes. Like if we're talking about replacing processed food or ultra processed food, seed oils, highly processed grains covered in glyphosate, all these, highly processed chemicals, and you're replacing those with whole food. Like, we go back 120 years and eat like we ate from the farm, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Or from like, what would be available in nature, whole food, single ingredient food. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that's not a drastic diet. To me, that's called common sense. That's just going back to
Exactly.
eating real food.
Yeah,
And and that can be balanced. And because there's a number of variations of how to do that. Those can all be, if you just going back to whole food, those can all be vegetarian, low carb, low fat, whatever. Those can fit under all those tools or strategies or frameworks. Um, but it's just going back to real food. You're just going back to before processed food was created. And that would create in my opinion, a tremendous change in the health of our entire population, right? Just by eliminating processed food. And I don't consider that an extreme diet or
yeah,
or a strategy or a dietary tool. I consider that common sense because all we have to do is look back at the history lesson. We didn't have obesity and type 2 diabetes or the level of heart disease that we have now prior to those processed foods being created. What I'm referring to is when we start eliminating or greatly reducing a certain macronutrient or food group that humans have traditionally eaten in order to create an effect. I'm not saying that's bad, but we don't need to place too much mm, dependence on that type of strategy for a long period of time because we need to understand that our bodies do adapt, and it will over time lose some of its effectiveness, and we might need to either reset or come out of it and come back in. um you know it, stagger it, cycle it in some
sure.
way, for it to continue to be somewhat effective, so it has the same effect it did at first. And so, I mean, if I were to put in a nutshell what I've learned over the last 30 years, it would be just
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, and that's great. So it was that reminds me of a podcast I did with a trainer named Tanner Shuck, and he was basically like, if the food didn't exist 200 years ago,
Yep.
don't don't eat it. And that's a great way to kind of simplify things all the way down. But yeah, like if it didn't directly come from an animal, if it wasn't directly grown from the ground or on a tree, like just don't eat it. And that might fix the majority of the issues that you're dealing with.
I would say from everything
Yeah,
from weight loss to autoimmune to gut issues, that's gonna move the needle probably more than any single strategy you could come up with. You know,
totally. Let's go back to the experimentation part and then what you
of,
went through, the routes that you tried in order to stumble across how you're eating right now. So I
okay.
know you mentioned earlier, obviously you've been doing this for a long time. I think you said you started off or you tried like a vegan diet or a vegetarian based diet for a few years. And then what changes? How did you feel when you were eating like that? And then through the course of time, where did you and how did you stumble across how you're eating right now?
Oh wow, that's a lot of time. But
Yeah.
the vegetarian, I'm 54, man. We're talking about I started playing with vegetarian vegan like at
You look
23.
great, by the way.
Thank you.
You look great for 54. If
Well, thank you.
when I'm 54, man, my goal is to look like you, 1,000%.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's in vegan vegetarian, that was probably I was probably 23-ish, 24. And I did it for a few
Mhm.
years, and it was just an experiment. I was trying to lean out. I had a friend who was eating this way, and I thought I'd give it a shot. And at first, I think my energy level went up a little bit. I could eat more food. Obviously, I
Mhm.
needed more food. Um, and I got lean really quick. I actually ended up losing, not really realizing it, losing, or not realizing it in the moment until it already happened. I look back and go, oh, wow, look what happened. I lost a lot of muscle, and and I found myself very hungry all the time. Energy was up and down a lot.
Mhm.
Like it was just up, down. I had to eat often. I was making my own almond milk at the time because it wasn't in stores back then. So I was blending up dry almonds, trying to find
Yeah.
ways to get protein out of plants.
Yeah.
And I wasn't eating a lot of processed food. I wasn't doing a bunch of shakes. So they didn't have all those things that we have now for vegetarians. Um, so it was like coming from beans, lots of black beans and rice, blending up almonds, making my own almond milk, and eating a lot of whole food. And it taught me how to cook. It taught me how to prepare food. It taught me to pay attention to food. And so I learned a lot from that. But at the end, towards that 3.5 year mark, I picked up this virus in my mouth that created these ulcers, basically in my throat, that I didn't want to eat. Like I didn't eat for 3 days. I didn't even drink water for about 36 hours. It hurt so bad until I got some antibiotics and painkillers. And my doctor had surprising insight, thought, you probably would have been able to shake this virus, except that your immune system is so depressed from your vegetarian diet. And I'm like, oh, and it was like, it was the truth I needed to hear. And
Yeah.
it made me go, he might very well be right,
Mhm.
and added in a little bit of salmon, some whey protein, and some eggs. That's simple, like really light. What would now, these days, people consider that, oh, that's vegetarian. Back in the 90s, that wasn't vegetarian. Those were considered meat, right?
Yeah.
So that was a lacto over. You had to specify a lacto over or pescatarian. That was it. But a little fish, a little whey protein, and some eggs, and within 2 weeks, it was like the lights came on in my
Yeah.
brain, more energy. I was suddenly feel like I was recovering from workouts. I actually forgot to drink coffee for a few days because I just didn't need it. I had
Mhm.
the energy in the morning. And and it was like, oh, I've definitely been missing this part of my diet. And as I started working animal protein back in, it was like the recovery, the muscle, the strength, all of that began returning. Again, trying to take from that what I learned and my new skills of cooking
Mhm.
and preparing food, and moving forward to help people eat more whole food. As I started shortly after that, started working as a trainer.
Mhm.
Um, Within a few years, probably about 4 or 5 years down the road, um, I've been married. Wife's had just had her third child. This is like 2002, and she was trying to lose some weight. She's, "Oh, I'm gonna try Atkins. I'm gonna try low carb Atkins." This has kind of made a comeback at that point.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, "Sure, give it a shot. Go ahead." And all my trainer, the other trainers I worked with, they're like, "Oh, that's dangerous. You gotta, you watch out for that. You gotta have carb. You gotta." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, but okay, but she lost weight. She did it for like pretty steadily for about 6, 8 months.
I bet she felt amazing too.
She felt better, but the thing in the process of doing it, she cleaned up her diet. So she was
Yeah.
eating like eggs and strawberries and, like a little fruit here and there at
Mhm.
first. And then it was like you just become more mindful of what you're putting in your body. And she wasn't eating all the weird snacks and stuff, but it was definitely a more mindful approach to diet. And she'd been working out before, after, through that time, whole thing, before she shifted her diet and after, and worked out before then. And just with the third child, it was just things were sticking a little bit more. We were a little older,
Yep.
but that caused, over about a 3 to 5 month period, the weight to fall off that she was looking for. And so it worked. And so I started trying to work that in with my clients as well. Like, take who wanted weight loss. Let's take a low carb approach. Start, here's how to cut these out. 2009, 2010, I started playing with intermittent fasting personally, and then
Okay.
eventually started working that in with some of my client strategies, the ones I thought could take it on and wanted to lose weight. And then fasted workouts followed shortly. And by probably, by my mid 40s at that point, well, a few years into that, in my mid 40s, I was doing fairly low carb with intermittent fasting and fasted workouts. And I probably pushed that needle like that for at least 8 years, maybe close to 10.
Interesting.
And until I hit a wall, and I just was like overtrained, sleep was disturbed, um, muscles burning, even when I hadn't worked out, and when started looking at blood work at that point,
Mm.
SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin, was very high, and which is usually or can be caused by high cortisol levels. But again, sleep was disturbed, wasn't recovering. Um, just started seeing some of the side effects of that. I'm like, okay, I'm over leveraging metabolic stress.
Mm.
There was a point where some of this was helpful, and I was a little bit younger. But as I got in my late 40s, pushing up, well, fit really into 50, I was like, I'm hitting a wall. Like, something's not right. And I didn't want at first to admit what it was. I didn't want to admit it was the way I was approaching my diet and the
Mm.
fast work, because this was like my mantra. This was the thing I told everybody to do. I
Sure.
had like married my diet dogma,
Yeah. I feel
and
like we all fall into those traps,
I,
especially, the people that are like carnivore or
yeah,
keto or whatever the case. Like that's just, I feel like that's common human nature, to get like something works, you find it, and then it's like you're married to it and
mm-hmm,
you're telling everyone about it and you don't want to come to terms that it's actually not working for me anymore. I gotta, like we were
yeah,
talking about earlier, make some shifts,
make some
change.
shifts, make some
Okay.
changes. And that was a hard reality. And, but I mean, it was one I knew I needed to face and kind of start making adjustments. So I started tracking, doing some blood work, and I stopped the intermittent fasting, stopped doing fasted workouts. Things improved, with recovery. I thought, well, what happens if I increase carbs? And at this point, I was kind of back and forth a little bit with a guy some people probably heard of, Paul Saladino.
Mhm.
And I wasn't eating super local, but I had plenty of fruit in my diet, definitely whole food, avoiding seed oils for a number of years. And um and just I'd hosted a retreat for him at one point in Costa Rica, and I ran into him on the beach in Miami Beach, and started batting some stuff around. I had already increased my carb intake by about a good 100, 120 grams a day. So I was up at between 200, 250, 300 sometimes.
What were the carb sources? Was it mainly fruit or were you throwing in
Fruits
potatoes,
and sweet
bread?
potatoes, fruit and sweet
Okay.
potatoes mostly. I wasn't doing a lot of white rice then, but I'm probably doing a little more of that now. But mostly it was just fruit and sweet potatoes and regular potatoes. And I'm like, man, I'd done this for about 10 months tracking, looked at my blood work. My fasting insulin had always been low, right around 3.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but my fasted blood sugar for many years during that low carb time, especially with all the intermittent fasting, had been often in the low to mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, I wasn't too happy about that. I wasn't too happy about having the blood sugar up in the 90s. And because I knew like the ideal range was like 65, 85 right in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, so when I got my blood work back after 10 months of increased carb intake, sort of, I said 250, 275 average, my fasting insulin was still right around 3, really hadn't budged, maybe dropped a tenth of a point. But my fasted blood sugar was down at 79. It had dropped a good 15 points from my previous blood work 10 months before, when I was
Interesting.
still eating below 200 grams of carbs a day. And so it had dropped back. I was feeling better. I was sleeping better. My sleep scores had improved. And I'm like, this is interesting. This is not, I mean, it was kind of what I'd hoped, but I didn't really know what to expect.
How did you overall feel just like bringing the carbs up? Did you feel like any sort of inflammation, stiffness, or were you just feeling really, really good?
More energetic,
Okay.
better sleep.
Probably
Um,
better, maybe workout performance in the gym, pump,
Definitely
energy, strength. Yeah.
muscle back on,
Yeah.
strength coming back. And it was like, okay, this is, and with no metabolic downside. Like
Interesting.
everything looked better. Cholesterol dropped. I mean, not that I was worried about it, but it was like total cholesterol and LDL dropped. I'd say, maybe 30, 40 points.
Do you
So
think it was maybe do you at all remember like maybe reducing the amount of fat intake or animal fat intake to bring in more of the carb sources? Did any of those shift, or you kept like the protein and the meat side of things pretty
I
consistent?
kept the protein higher, like still doing at that point 1 gram per pound of body weight, give or take, like maybe
Yep, that's what
0.8
I
to
do.
1 gram per pound body weight. So I was still eating about, and I wasn't trying to eat leaner fit. I was still eating, hamburgers, pork, some ribeye, I mean, like the fattier
Sure.
meats. So my fat intake was probably, when I'm tracking, anywhere from 90 to 120 grams a day. So fairly high fat. To me, that seems certainly not low.
Hmm.
Um, Carb. So it was almost, and I started looking at I don't know if you remember, maybe a little before your time, but there was something called the Zone Diet that came out.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. Barry Sears Zone Diet. It was like 40, 30, 40 carbs, 30 fat, 30 protein. And it wasn't too far off from that. It wasn't too far off when I had 100 grams of fat, 200 grams of protein, and maybe 250, 275 carb. That's right around a 40, 30, 30.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is like a balanced diet, whole food, animal protein, and I feel great. Numbers are improved. And I said, I ran into Saladino, and I know he had increased his around the same time I had, or maybe a year before.
Yeah, he wrote the carnivore book, and then a
Code,
couple, or
carnivore code.
the carnivore code, and then I think it was a couple years after that. And the one thing I will say, what I do appreciate about Paul Saladino is that he was very transparent and open, and not one of those people that was religious to his diet. Like he
Right.
was the carnivore guy, and then he started running into some.
Yeah.
I think he was running into some blood marker issues,
Yeah.
and that's when he started bringing in like the fruit and the honey and
Yeah.
some carbohydrates.
It
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah. So
testosterone and thyroid and those kind of things. Yeah.
yeah. So what did he tell you?
Well, he just said, "Hey, go for 350, go for 400, go on up, should give it a shot,
Interesting.
go take it on up, see what you can do." And he said, see how you feel." And he knew. I mean, I'd been to his first retreat. I hosted the second one for him out in Costa Rica. I mean, you know, he knew who he was talking to. He wasn't talking to somebody. He knew he wasn't talking to somebody with food addictions or with who was um,
Yeah.
gonna go off and start eating donuts and French fries. And he knew. I mean, he knew
Yeah.
it's gonna be a whole
Yeah. He
food
knew
source
he
food.
knows it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a fitness guy. Yeah.
And so I was like, all right. And let's think about this. And it took me a second to really like munch on that. And it wasn't that I was going to do it just because Paul's told me to do it, but it was almost like someone who has been through the same kind of experimentation, like said, gave me permission to continue to experiment. And it wasn't permission like you've been blessed by Paul Saladino. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, and through a conversation, let's bat some ideas around and then keep going. Like, keep
Mm,
experimenting. Don't hold back. Don't stop there. What else? Like, what else are you going to learn? So it's like, it's kind of like keep exploring and see what your body does. It wasn't like this is the answer. It was find out how your body responds to that. Don't stop exploring. Don't stop
mm,
experimenting.
yeah.
In other words, don't get stuck, which is what I'd done in previous times and what he had done with carnivore. And before that, he was a
Yep.
vegetarian,
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, it was like, okay. So this was still part of my journey, of like realizing there isn't a way or one diet or one thing that fits for everybody, or you all the time, or you at every age, or you. And so this is what's led me in playing with different diets and different ratios to realizing if when we get stuck on one, when we develop a relationship with our diet,
Sure.
which is then wrapped around our community, or our
Mm,
community is wrapped around it with our identity,
mm-hmm.
we get stuck. We stop making good decisions. We stop making objective decisions, and we're making emotional decisions about our
Yeah.
diet as it relates to, again, our identity, our community. What am I doing wrong? Do I just need to diet harder? And really what's happening is your body has adjusted or is adjusting, or you're going through a process, whether it's run the course of adapting to it, or it's just that you've healed this thing. Now it's time to move on and get stronger. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than worry about a reductionist diet to try to, or elimination diet to try to eliminate some sort of issue, whatever it is you might be dealing with. There's there's always room for change and improvement, not because the other way was wrong, not because a new way is more right, but
Mm-hmm.
because your body doesn't stop changing.
Yeah, dude, I don't think I can agree with you more on that. 1,000%. And this is one of the reasons why I chose like the low carb consultant handle. When I went on my own personal journey of trying to like might heal myself, like I did strict carnivore for a year. I did keto. I had played around with OMAD, eating one meal a day.
Hmm.
I played around with intermittent fasting and long-term fasting and all those different types of things. And guess what? They work. They all work. But I think when you're stuck on one diet for one specific period of time, going back to what you were saying, what does the human body want to do? The human body wants to find, in what you said earlier in terms of like homeostasis, your body wants to run as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And it's going to consistently try to evolve and change based off of what you're eating, your energy output, the environment that you're in, all of those things. And by the way, like your body is just getting older and changing naturally day in and day out.
Yeah.
But your body wants to find something that it can kind of almost like a self-regulation standpoint. So what I'm saying here is at every point, a diet will run its course. And what you have to find the ability to do, and really at the end of the day, if you really just settle on a like an animal-based whole foods approach, single ingredient approach, that's what's going to get you to where you want to be, like we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
But it's like you also have to get comfortable with changing how you eat because your body's going to adapt to what you're doing. And
Yeah.
also too, are you training for like your interests are going to change,
Right.
right? Like your workout interests are going to change. You might want to get into bodybuilding, and then you might want to get into a different type of strength training, or maybe you want to train for a triathlon or a marathon. All of these different things take are going to require different energy inputs,
Hmm.
right? And so those are the things you have to take into consideration. Like so 100%, man. I absolutely agree with you. That makes all the sense in the world. So when it comes to let's talk about how you're eating now, right? So like
Are
yeah,
you sure?
I would love to get into how you're eating right now. You know, you were talking about your age. You look great for your age, and I'm sure everybody would want to know, okay, like what does Zane's day-to-day look like? And I'm curious to know, like, what your day-to-day looks like. You were talking about training fasted. So, like, when you get up in the morning, like, do you eat breakfast? Do you fast? Like, what are you eating? When do you work out? Like, tell me what like a day-to-day looks like for you.
I mean, day to day, I don't even know if I lock into a day to day too much anymore because it's just it's too many variables. But I um I don't fast anymore. I'm not
Mhm.
that sold on it, to be honest with you, anymore. I think there's some at this point I need to keep some distance from it because the cortisol um impact and the impact it had on my sleep, I think I'm still correcting. And so because I've done
Interesting.
other things where I see my sleep correct or change or improve through a much higher carb approach. And then depending on how much I'm training. So my focus, I think my greatest or most of my focus on what I'm trying to improve right now is really my sleep. And I'm looking at the Oura Ring data. Um, and so I'm basing a lot on that, as well as making sure, hey, am I getting stronger, or am I are my workouts improving, or am I not just going backwards? Making
Mm,
sure at least I'm holding ground in certain areas. And where's it? Can I add some variety to that energy? Am I getting more? I want to work on more mobility, so I'm backing off on really pushing strength training uh, all the time and working in more mobility movements, more ground moving, and just trying to improve my range of motion and moving in extreme ranges of motion and being comfortable in those ranges. With my diet, you probably, if you're paying attention to YouTube, social media, you probably heard all the buzz around the sugar diet.
yeah.
Coming out, Mark
Yeah.
Bell, Jay
Yeah.
Campbell talking about it.
Yeah.
This guy Joe Bentley out in Miami, who's pretty much developed it, who's helping these bodybuilders get ready for shows and increase. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm listening to these guys, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm like, there's foods in this diet I wouldn't touch. There's foods in this diet that I have any desire to eat. I wouldn't feel good if I ate them. I don't think they belong in my gut. Um, but but I'm already playing with diet. I've increased carb. I didn't reduce fat when I did initially when I increased my carb intake. And I was walking around, as I'm listening to this, I'm walking around at that point, probably close to 12 or 13% body fat, which is a little
Oof.
high for me. And so I realize it's not high for everybody, and
Yeah.
that's a relative thing. But for me, as far as across my lifespan, that's on the high side. And I
Okay.
don't need to carry that much. Am I stronger? Do I carry more weight? Yeah, I'm like 210 at that point. But I'm like, I bet if I play with this, I could probably drop 5, 6 pounds of fat if I do this correctly and not, um, and try not, and in a way that does not overtrain me or a way that's more sustainable. See if I can get down to like a 9 to 10% body fat and see
Mhm.
how sustainable it is for what period of time. Because I've had clients say, I want to get down to 9% or 9.5%. I'm like, you might touch on it. You might get there and go, hey, this is great. Take a picture, go to the beach, take your vacation. But
Yeah.
you may not like staying there or what it takes to stay there because it's for many people, it's not sustainable, depending on what the stress in their life, what's going on in their life, what their age. That is not the other, every factor, not just your diet and exercise, but your job, your family, all the other stressors in your life play a part in what your body can sustain. And so I'm like, how can this be a sustainable way for someone to reach a low body fat, at least for a period of time?
Sure.
And how would I do it without getting stuck or having the downside of, because with this sugar diet, what's happening is they got a very high carb intake, low to moderate protein, depending on the phase it's in, very low fat. And you won't get a lot of these details, maybe listening to some of the big talking heads, right? Because they're just kind of playing with it and they're talking, they're not getting the nitty gritty. But digging deeper into the guy who created this, uh, I was like, okay, so he has different phases where he's doing these high carb, low protein, very low fat phases, and then he has a refeed after maybe sometimes 4 or 5 days, comes back out of it, pushes some protein, pushes a little more fat, and then dives back in. And okay, he's figured something out. He's figured out how to maintain the edge of the diet without over leveraging it so that your body's, when you cut that fat back, you don't stop producing hormones. Your body doesn't start tanking energy wise. Um, you're creating a refeed almost weekly to allow, then go back in and allow the effectiveness of that diet to do its work. And so I've played with this diet for about eating whole food. So
Mm-hmm.
fruit,
Yep.
sweet potato, white rice, sometimes some sourdough, um, fruit juice, honey, those kind of things, not doing candy, not doing sodas, um, and played with about 7 weeks. I had a little travel in between there, so I had a week on two different trips where there was like 3 days here, 5 days there of travel where I just couldn't do it,
Yeah.
and kind of worked my way through it. Of a very
Interesting.
high carb, so high carb being somewhere to 300 to 400 grams of carbs a day, moderate protein on certain phases where it was like maybe from my weight at 200 ish to just slightly over 200, I was probably doing 100 to 120 grams. So there were days when it was as low as 30 grams of beef, not collagen, but beef gelatin. And there was and then there was a phases where it was like the 120 maybe, but certain times of the day. So basically you're playing with this diet. And over about 6 or 7 weeks, I did a scan, kind of a biometric, a nice bioimpedance machine, very high end, like $20,000 bioimpedance machine at a doctor's office. Before and after, in the middle of that, I did a DEXA scan just because it came up. I was at a podcast and the guy said, "Hey, I got this. Do you want to come see my facility? We'll get a DEXA scan." So I was pretty much on track.
Yep.
And beginning to end, in that 7 week period, I lost 6 pounds of body fat. And it said picked up zero 0.8 pounds of muscle. Now, I know better than to know that I didn't put on muscle tissue. But
Yeah.
what I felt right away when I increased my glycogen or increased my carb intake and reduced the fat, I felt the pump in my muscles right away. So I felt this
Yeah.
sudden pump go in. I felt all this hydration, all this glycogen coming in my muscles, and my workouts were like I was I was suddenly adding reps to the weight I'd been using for a while. All of a sudden, reps started coming on within the first 2 or 3 weeks.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it was fueling, obviously, and that was
Yep.
the initial like we have was every diet where we put in the new diet, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly our body responds in this way. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? And so that immediate response was, for the most part, positive. It was a little odd. It was a little, there's times I couldn't even eat maintenance calories because I just got sick of eating carbs and sweet things. I'm just
Yeah.
sick, like didn't want it. I'd be 400 or 500, 600 calories well below maintenance.
Oh, wow.
Didn't want to eat, no appetite. It killed it. I tapped out. I'm like, I can't do anything more sweet. I wanted like cucumbers with vinegar because that was a carb, but it was like salty, covered in salt. I just wanted salt and crunch. Um, but it was this very interesting experiment to push this, but to go in to these extreme moments of very low fat, high carb for about 4 or 5 days, come
Interesting.
out, push up the protein, eat protein 4 meals a day on one refeed day, and then evenings one day before that, evenings of animal protein one day after that, with fruit in the morning, and then dive back in for about 4 or 5 weeks. I did that as I progressed into this, and that's when I hit the 6 pound weight fat loss. 1 pound said muscle increase, which was glycogen,
Yeah.
obviously, and my sleep scores improved. So more deep sleep. My HRV initially bumped up to where my old highs were my new lows. It started going up, and then it kept creeping up from there over the period of time where it practically doubled my HRV
I
and
wonder why the sleep increase, and I wonder if maybe it was
lowering cortisol.
because lowering cortisol. Okay.
And my heart rate dropped when might bounce between like occasionally high 40s to mid 50s. I'd have entire weeks where I was down between 44 and 49. My resting heart rate at night
Yeah.
dropped at least 6 point average. And I'm like, there's something going on here. So I'm getting, okay, improved sleep scores with lower heart rate, improved HRV, losing body fat, and I'm not overtraining. I'm actually getting stronger and I'm not burning up muscle. So
Did you
it's,
know though? Did you know though for a fact that you weren't burning up muscle? Because so I'm familiar with the sugar diet. I'm very much intrigued by it. I'm a big
yeah,
fan of Mark Bell. I'm a big fan of Jay Campbell. Watch their videos. Um, and the sugar diet is very, very interesting. And I want to get your thoughts on this because
yeah,
just in my opinion though, I think for someone like you that's in shape, that's sitting at 13 or 14% body fat, the diet makes sense in my opinion, or could make sense because you're almost hacking your own metabolism by
correct.
dropping the protein, by dropping the fat and increasing your carbohydrates and sugars, right? You're almost forcing your body into like an overdrive type of body fat burning stimulation
Exactly.
scenario.
Thermogenesis as well.
Yes. But so here's what's interesting and where I think it could be, and I want to get into like the muscle, potentially like muscle wasting situation people might run into because the protein's low, but I know there's a refeed here. So here's my question though. So for people that are like, let's say obese,
Yeah.
right? Maybe they've got 100 pounds to lose,
Okay.
which would be completely different than your situation, and even Mark Bell's situation where he's trying to get down to like 200 pounds. So it's like
He
he
dropped like
really,
20, 25 on it, I think. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But would this approach be a smart way to go for someone that's got to lose like 100, 200 pounds?
That's a great question. And I look forward to experimenting with that. Actually, if I get somebody to take me on it. But I've heard some of these people, these guys talk about that and say, yeah, I've watched people, I have people telling me they're dropping who are overweight and insulin resistant, diabetic, coming off of with a higher carb or even with a bioenergetic diet, a higher carb, lower fat, moderate protein diet, reversing insulin resistance and, uh, and continuing to drop weight because you're getting the fat out of the way. So fat and carbohydrates compete for metabolism in the cell, right? The Randle
Yeah,
cycle. So basically they compete. And so it's it's a one of the issues that's keeping blood sugar high in an insulin resistant person is that they're insulin resistant at the liver. Okay, which I
hmm,
believe initiates for most people from the seed oils causing low energy availability in the cell. Then the body starts pulling blood sugar out of the bloodstream to feed the cells so they don't die. And then the brain is telling the liver, kick up gluconeogenesis. So we have an elevated gluconeogenesis, which we see in type 2 diabetics. They have very elevated gluconeogenesis, elevated stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and glucagon. Not only does that increase blood sugar production from the liver, but it also releases free fatty acids. And so you have
got it.
free fatty acids going through the bloodstream at the same time as this high sugar production. And so those are now competing for metabolism. And this is when they haven't even eaten something. So, we know diabetics can wake up to it. We call the dawn effect. Like you and I, we get a little burst of blood sugar in the morning because cortisol goes
Yeah,
up. It wakes us up. It might pump up to 100, maybe 95, maybe 110. Who knows? Um, a diabetic can wake up to 180, 200, 250. They haven't eaten for 6 or 8 hours.
yeah,
You know, where's that coming from? It's not because they ate something 12 hours ago or 8 hours ago. It's because their liver is dumping blood sugar because their cortisol levels are through the roof. They're insulin resistant to the liver. The liver's not shutting off when insulin is released. It's not shutting off that sugar production. And so you've got insulin resistance at the liver just pumping sugar out and elevated cortisol levels, as well as, again, it's breaking down fat and releasing free fatty acids in the bloodstream. And so they've got energy toxicity. They've got an overabundance of energy in the bloodstream
mm,
and high stress hormones. Uh, and the brain is cut. What should be a shutoff switch for the liver, the brain's overriding it because it's like we're still worried about the lack of energy from um, the impact of the seed or the PUFA, the high level of PUFA that is being oxidized in the mitochondria in the cells that is impacting metabolism. Basically, instead of turning that fat into energy, it's being stored as fat, and you have a low energy production. Even though there's
Yeah.
plenty of energy around, there's no ATP, right? We have fat and we have carbs, but there's not ATP being produced on a level to keep the cells alive. So now we have pump up the blood sugar. So um, with by reducing the fat and increasing the carbohydrates are going to help at some point, shut off that cortisol. So when you have carbs, I mean, that's why when we're stressed, we reach for the sugar, the carbs. It
Sure.
turns down cortisol. The insulin will turn down cortisol, and it you have enough insulin to finally push that fuel into the muscle cells or the other cells. Also, if you move the fat out of the way, then there is more cells available to take on that sugar. And so we have a huge history of low fat diets working to reverse insulin resistance, um, hypertension, and obesity, starting with the rice diet back in 1949. I'm familiar with Dr. Kempner's rice diet in the 1940s. Have you read about that?
I'm not familiar with that. No.
Okay. So it was basically, they ate he had about several hundred people, but this was 1940s, North Carolina. Um, they had a bunch of people who are hypertensive. And back then, this is before we had hypertensive medication. Hypertension would kill you in 6 months to a year, right? If you had high blood pressure, you'd die. It's a death sentence.
Hmm.
6 months to a year, you're going to die. So it puts them on this white rice, fruit juice ad libitum. Okay. They can eat as much as they want. Uh,
Where was the protein at? Just non-existent?
the white rice, it was 5% protein, zero fat, pretty much zero fat, and 95% carb, 98% carb.
Interesting.
And he saved their lives, reversed the hypertension. He had about 120 people that were insulin resistant, diabetic, obese, that lost an average of 140 pounds on this white rice diet, adding aluminum. Get rid of the fat, all the carbs, mostly white rice with all the fruit juice and sugar they wanted, and the only protein was from the white rice.
Hmm.
And then he had several that were, reversed their hypertension or their neuropathy, that kind of thing, things related to diabetes. But it was started with hypertension, then a lot of weight loss with an average loss of 140 pounds, and then reversing diabetes. And then they developed hypertension meds shortly after that, and this kind of like lost some of its edge because they didn't need the diet; they could just give the drugs. We've heard that
Hmm.
story before.
Yeah.
But there's several diets over the last several decades that have been low-fat diets that were effective at reversing insulin resistance, which there's plenty of documentation. There's plenty of literature on these, um, and so we have to basically, if we're going to choose we got to choose one or the other. When you have like what I was doing, which was the zone diet, we have a really balanced carb and fat. That's not ideal for somebody who is insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, in my opinion. It's not ideal for weight loss. It's
Yeah,
fine for someone who's
you got two sources of energy coming in. The
yeah,
body's never going to want to tap into stored body fat if you've got a high
right.
level of carbs and a high level of fat. That's like,
No, you don't
yeah,
need anything. Yeah, that's why I
yeah,
got up to
hmm,
13%. And I was
yeah,
if someone active enough, if I had been more active or, was out surfing 3 hours a morning like Paul,
yeah,
um, then that probably wouldn't have happened. I would have been perfect, right? If you're an athlete, that's how I would want to feed an athlete. That's how I'd want to feed somebody who's super active and young and. But so reversing disease and you're reversing weight, you've got to pick a fuel source. You've got to either go with carbs and cut the fat back, or you can try going with fat and cut the carbs back. But you can't have an equal amount or a high amount of both, right?
hmm,
Um, they're competing for a place to be metabolized. They're competing for cell space essentially to be metabolized for your energy. And if you got both, there's no reason for your body to, like you said, to burn off fat. And so with this low fat, I was reducing body fat. If you
Interesting.
have someone who needs 100 pounds to lose and you want them to burn off their stored body fat, one of the very simple and documented ways to do that is to eliminate the fat in their diet or greatly reduce it. So whatever fat they need, their body has to pull from body fat. Is that a long-term sustainable diet? No.
Yeah.
Is being obese and diabetic a long-term sustainable state?
Mhm.
Not in my
No.
opinion. Pick your poison.
Sure.
So if you can correct the ailment with a unsustainable diet and then reincorporate a more sustainable diet that's clean and full of healthy food and doesn't put the toxins back in that started the disease to begin with, I say we got to fix. It just doesn't look the same from point A all the way to point C, right? There's going to be at point somewhere at point B, you got to shift your strategy. And so this is where I am right now, where there is no, with a diet that creates an effect, there's no such thing as sustainable. It's like, what do you want to solve? It's a tool. It's a
Yeah.
strategy. Pull the lever for what you need it for, and then correct, or like I was doing, coming in and out of it to reset on a weekly basis, and then going back in, getting the effect of it, and then resetting, and then getting the effect of it and resetting. That doesn't sound like fun to most people. Most people don't want to tinker like that,
Exactly.
but that's how that's why it worked, and it
A
worked in a
thousand
short period
percent.
of time.
I honestly agree with you so much with what you said. Like all these diets are tools. That's what they are. The sugar diet, sugar fasting, ketogenic, low carb, high carb, whatever it is, zone if it fits your macro. All these diets are tools. And I think what the problem here is a lot of people don't have necessarily maybe the willpower or discipline that you might have in regards to doing the tinkering that you're doing,
100%.
going in 3 to 4 days. Like people just don't want to do that. People want to,
They
and
want to
here's the
set
part.
it and forget it.
Exactly. That's what they want to do. And I think it's because the human brain, the brain wants like a routine. The brain wants to get, that's why people like to diet. They're like, oh, I'm on this diet. I'm going to be on it for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the case is. And sure, that's whatever. The brain likes the routine, but at some point, you're going to lose weight. And then for you to get past plateaus or you to get down from 13% to like 9 or whatever the case is, you will absolutely have to make shifts and flips with the macros and the energy in order to get the body to want to move through that. And I
Yeah.
just, what my point is, I just don't think people have that discipline and willpower. And most people don't, I would say.
No. However, to 9%, no. But if you get somebody who's 30% or 35% down to
Sure.
18% by saying, here's your food list, here's when you can eat this, here's when you can eat that, simplify a diet, and you're going to work out. And if you don't want to work out, I'm sorry, how bad do you really want to lose weight and change your health?
Yeah.
So with that diet, especially with a high carb diet, you have to strength train. You need to do, it was helpful to do some high intensity interval cardio, and you need to be doing some low level cardio to burn some fat as well. This is not I'm just going to do this and not work. I'm just going to do the diet. I'm not going to work out. I'm not going to worry about it. It's like, well, then good luck to you. I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to help you if you're not willing to do what actually is required of you to be healthy long term.
Yeah.
Exercise is not just a tool for weight loss. Exercise is a tool for longevity. And it's a strategy for longevity, but you absolutely need it for healthy weight loss to maintain muscle. Obese people, they're eating their muscle, their gluconeogenesis on high gear like that. They're breaking down muscle and turning it into blood sugar. They are literally eating themselves. That's why calories in, calories out doesn't work for many of these people because
Mhm.
they're creating calories from the lean mass with the gluconeogenesis. They're breaking down muscle, turning into sugar. They didn't eat that sugar that day. They
Mhm.
turned it sugar. They turned muscle into sugar. That created calories that they didn't eat. That's stored lean mass.
Mm.
That's what their body's doing. And we have to shut that down. You've got to shut down the gluconeogenesis. That's why we're seeing carnivores and keto
Mm,
people with high blood sugars in the 90s, hundreds, 110, 115, some of them with A1Cs that are at 5.9, 6, 6.1, and they have low fasting insulin. They still have a low fasting insulin, but but their body, their gluconeogenesis in the stress response to a lack of glucose coming into their diet, they're cranking up the gluconeogenesis. They're breaking down lean mass from muscle, skin, and bone, and whatever meat they're eating. And they're
mm-hmm,
cranking up the blood sugar so much at night to recover from the lack of glucose in their diet and maybe whatever exercise they're doing. That's probably adding to the problem. Now their bodies all night long, cortisol's up,
mm,
gluconeogenesis is cranked, their blood sugar levels, their fasted blood sugar is high, and their A1Cs are high because it doesn't come back down. And so those red blood cells are being exposed to higher blood sugar on a more consistent basis throughout the day. We see this a little bit with athletes where they maybe have a higher A1C because they're training so much that their blood sugar goes up because of the stress of training, and they come up and peak and hit it, and they might be pushing like 5.6, 5.7, but they're healthy, and it's because they're training so much. With carnivore and keto, and then I mean, I've been, and I'm not trying to poke holes or pick fights,
sure.
but I've been at keto conferences, and
Yeah.
I've been in the line watching people put food on their plate, and they've got some of these people had 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose
Mm,
with a big hunk of fatty meat on their plate. And then they put a chunk of butter on top of that was 500 to 800 calories of butter right there, just in that meal.
oh God. Yeah.
500 to 800
I've
calories
got thoughts on this.
of
I've got
fat,
thoughts on this.
of fat
Yeah.
on top of the fatty meat. There is no way their body is going to burn up that much fat in one day, let alone if they're eating that much in one meal. They're not going to their body is not utilizing the percentage of calories coming from fat in their active day is
Yeah.
not going to offset the amount of fat that they're eating.
Oh, and are you familiar with Craig Emmerich?
Oh yeah, and Marie. I mean, I've met Craig.
Yeah.
I mean, once or twice, but I know Maria. I mean, I've met Maria a couple times. Yeah, we've
Yeah, yeah. So I had him on. We were literally talking about this exact same thing because, like, they consult with people on
yeah.
ketogenic diets, low carb diets, carnivore diets, all those types of things. They're seeing people coming to them from the high fat carnivore space, like you were
Mhm.
just alluding to, that are actually gaining weight.
Yeah,
And
of
it's just
course.
like, and
Yep.
it's the simple, in my opinion, it's a simple thought of like, okay, if you've got 50 pounds to lose and you're throwing a steak, like a super high fat steak, cut a meat, and you're putting like a stick of fucking butter on top of it, right? Why in the fuck would your body want to tap into stored body? If weight loss is your goal, why in the fuck would your body want to tap into stored body fat when you have so much excess fat coming in through the diet?
It's not
Like,
going
yeah,
to.
yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
And I think people have that very, very backwards. Can you use a high fat carnivore for other things? It's a tool, right? Like we were just saying. Can you use it for other things like maybe healing, go on a ketogenic diet for like
Autoimmune,
mental autoimmune, all those types of
IBS,
things.
all
A
sorts of gut.
thousand
Just
percent.
like yeah,
1,000%. But when the goal is weight loss, you might lose some weight initially, but
yeah,
the body is not going to want to tap into stored body fat if it's sensing that you are in an environment where food is abundant and you're eating that amount of fat
fat.
coming in through the diet. It's just not going to lose weight.
You only need so much fat. Your
Yeah.
body is that you don't have an infinite demand on fat. Even the best ketogenic diet, the most pristine ketogenic diet, your body's only going to use about maybe 65, 70% at the best, 70% of your calories coming from fat.
Yeah.
Then you got a little offset, but mostly the energy is coming. Glucose is there. Your brain, you got erythrocytes, your red blood cells don't burn fat because they don't have mitochondria, right? So, and then certain parts of your brain, kidney, eyes, testes, glucose is being used. If you exercise, glucose, type 2 muscle fibers, you got to store some. you are going to use glucose. You never stop using glucose. That's why you have blood sugar and you're using it constantly. It's just why gluconeogenesis ramps up with a low carb or ketogenic diet. It ramps
Yeah.
up to offset the lack of glucose coming into your diet. You need glucose. You are always going to use glucose. You're not going to have 90% of your calories that you're burning coming from fat. It's
Mm,
impossible. It's impossible. And so you it's a crude analogy, but
mm,
the person in the starving in a concentration camp has it is in perfect ketosis but they have gluconeogenesis elevated. They're breaking down some protein to offset their
hmm.
glucose needs. They're probably breaking down some body fat for ketogenic and they're whatever they're eating, but
Yeah.
they are starving.
Yeah.
And so if you create a weight loss diet, the diet where you're supposed to lose weight, you are creating some element of a starvation response because you're trying to eat tissue, even the low fat, high carb one. You're creating some level where because you've got to use the fat, right? You don't
Yeah.
have, you have a lack of fat, so you got to use your own body fat. The thing about the high carb is that because insulin is elevated and you have plenty of room for glycogen, it supports the muscle tissue. The insulin is a tissue sustaining or supportive, growth hormone, and the glycogen keeps the muscles full. So your blood sugar's up and the glycogen's available and the insulin is helping you hang on to muscle tissue. And it's shutting down the cortisol, which is what breaks down. The cortisol was part of what breaks down the muscle lean mass to turn into glucose for gluconeogenesis. So if you're turning down the breakdown hormones, the stress hormones, and the glucagon, which is the
Hmm.
other big one, and you're lifting up the hormones that, like insulin, that's supporting lean mass, but there's not enough fat on board dietarily, your body's got to pull fat from somewhere. And it's going to pull
Yeah.
fat from your fat stores. Am I trying to? I'm not trying to tell people what to do. I'm saying look at this through a different lens,
Mm,
and uh, maybe a lens that you had not considered before. Look at the history we have on it, the literature we have on it, and consider how the might be a different way, and that, but a little bit of common sense, like what you just mentioned, where if you are eating, 12, 1,300 calories, 1,400 calories from fat a day, and you're trying to lose body fat, you have not given your body any reason to burn fat because you are supplying all your fat needs in your diet.
yeah.
And so, I not to interrupt you, but I mean, it was like that kind of help. The first question you said, what if could you lose muscle on this? Is like, if you do a fruit fast too long, where you're doing super high carb, very low protein, almost no fat for a long period of time, yeah, you'll start burning. But by coming in and out of it, and then resetting back to a maintenance phase of moderate protein, high carb, low fat, you can still keep burning fat and maintain the muscle. And we see this with these bodybuilders who are doing this diet. With eating more carb, you don't need as much protein. You don't need a gram of protein per pound of body weight to
Yeah.
sustain your muscle because you've got insulin and glycogen supporting that muscle tissue, and you're not trying to turn protein into glucose on the same level you would be if you were on a low carb diet.
Yeah, and I've heard and I think it's a smart way for bodybuilders to diet down and get in shape for a show, right? Because it seems to me like going like the sugar diet route would enable them to feel not as depleted and potentially have a little bit more better of a look, if that makes sense. They
Mm-hmm.
won't show up as flat because they'll have more, a little bit more water, but also a little bit more glycogen.
Yeah.
They'll be fuller, basically.
And your veins are like popping.
Yeah. I want to real quick here, Zane. I want to be
Sure.
respectful of what we got going on here
Yeah.
because the time just flew by. We're a little over an hour. Are we still okay to go for a little bit longer? Because I did have some other questions here that I want to get to.
Sure. And I know
How you
I
doing
kind
on
of like
time?
ran away with the with the experiment. But I
N
mean,
no, I wanna kinda go back into it, but I just wanna make sure you're okay on time.
yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So going back to the initial question, then this is how we kinda got on the sugar diet route. So in terms of, like, your day-to-day now, are you kind of, like, flexing the sugar diet in, like, 3 or 4 days a week and then doing, like, a protein refeed? Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm doing currently, and I'm, subject to change, right? Subject to
Sure.
adjustment. Like I think at this point, anything, I'm going to put that sticker on just about everything. That I'm doing a higher carb fruit, white rice, sweet potato type diet with honey and stuff. I'm doing high carb in the morning, or higher carb by starting my day with that.
Interesting.
No, um, uh, no protein in the morning that would have any that would stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So it's really a gelatin or collagen based protein. So it doesn't have isoleucine essentially. Um, and it's a lot of fruit. And then by say 2, 3 o'clock, I start incorporating the animal protein as part of my recovery. Working workouts with some strength training, low end cardio, and then some higher intensity cardio sprinkled in there. Uh, and so I'm enjoying it right now with a lower fat, and my fat is staying at around. So I'm basically like 60 to 70% carb at the moment, about 20, sometimes it fluctuates to 20, 25% protein, and
Okay.
about 10, at most 15% fat, but a lot of times it's around 10% fat during the week. And then the weekend, I let off the gas, I let off the brakes a little bit on the fat. I don't feel the need for as much carb when I do that. My body kind of just naturally regulates.
Mm,
I have a little more protein, a little more animal fat is let in, and but not more than say 15, 20%. Like I won't go over intentionally unless I go out to eat with my family, in which case I can't control what I'm eating. But
yep,
I have no reason to go over 40 grams of fat in a day. And most of the time I'm staying under 30. And I think most people, like honestly, I want to get on another tangent,
sure.
but the carb intake is going to be between 300 and 400 grams a day for the most part during the week. Um, like I said, the fat's staying below 20, maybe below 30, and the protein's at 120, 125 right in there. And I'm maintaining,
That's a day? That's a day,
that's a
the protein.
day. Yeah.
Okay,
And
got it.
I'm maintaining right around the 202 to 204 weight, which is what I dieted down to from the with the 13% when I dropped to 6 pounds. I think I got a low, maybe a pound lower than that, the lowest end of it. But I'm maintaining comfortably at this lower body fat and lower weight, which I really am enjoying. I'm kind of
Mm,
liking being a little bit lighter, not bounce around at 210, but staying right around 202 to 204, and noticeably leaner through the middle, through the abs, through on the shoulder. I mean, I'm noticeably leaner and more vascular, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm doing it in a way that I'm not currently feeling any downside. If I did, I'd know what to do. I just got to refuel with some animal protein and some animal fat. But I'm doing a little bit of that on the weekend. So I'm really being me. Like I don't mind break gas, break gas, break gas a little bit through the week. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like
yep,
just making adjustments, and then letting my body figure out on looking at the sleep scores, looking at but maintaining basically a low fat diet. But I would say in general, most people who need to lose weight, which is the majority of our country,
yep,
and who are metabolically challenged, don't need to be eating more than 50 grams of fat in a day. If they were to start tracking, if they ate more than 50, they would lose weight. If they could reduce, and you look at someone who starts tracking, who's just eating, I'm going to eat out here with this family, I'm going to eat a little bit of this here, I'm going to grab that there. They're well over 100 grams of fat. They're not
yeah,
eating a healthy diet, but they're well over 100 grams of fat. And I'm not saying putting it below 50 grams without having a healthy diet as well is the magic sauce. Definitely a healthy whole food diet with animal protein, right? I'm all for it. But if we still have people doing that who aren't losing weight, as you and I know. If we could take it down to 50 grams or less, if you have a weight problem, take your fat down to 50 grams or less and eat whole food.
yep,
I'd say you're going to lose some fat.
absolutely. 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I have some rapid fire questions that don't necessarily need like a rapid fire answer. So feel free
Don't
to
tell me
like,
that because you know I can go
yeah.
down the bunny trail.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's okay. As long as we're good on time, that's fine.
That's fine.
So let's go into it. What
Yeah.
is the single worst habit men over 40 do that's killing their progress?
Oh. Ooh. Alcohol. And if that's not in, then it's the fast. It's reaching for the fast food. It's reaching for
Mm,
the. It's reaching for the greasy seed oil food. Ultra processed food. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
What's the fastest way for someone over 40 to look and feel 10 years younger?
Same answer. I mean, get rid of the look, ultra processed food, seed oils, highly oxidative. We talk about oxidative stress is what creates disease. It is
Mhm,
not macronutrients don't create disease. We have indigenous populations all over the world that eat carb intake of 60 to 80 85% of their diet, lower protein, maybe it's lower fat, some have coconut oil, higher fat. They all eat whole food. They don't have disease. Ultra processed food is what's oxidative. That's oxidative stress is what causes disease in our cells, our mitochondria. This is where disease starts. Oxidative stress comes from the highly ultra processed food are inflaming our mitochondria trying to process these really industrial fats.
mhm.
If we can eliminate the oxidative stress, so much disease, so many of our issues start to diminish and go away. And look back 120 years, we didn't have them. We've created them. So that's my long-winded answer for that one.
No, and this could goes I think I know then the answer to this next question. If you had to pick just one food to cut forever for better health, I'm gonna guess here, would it be seed oils
It
or would it be
would. Ding, ding,
yeah.
ding. Yeah. Yeah. You are correct. I think we would see a tremendous, not that glyphosate isn't an issue, not that, being over medicated isn't an
Yeah,
issue. But that's where it started. It started with the Crisco. It started with the fake lard. It started with all the oil, the soybean oils and the corn oils and the margarines. That's where it started, 1910 to 1930. Because before that, we didn't have the obesity and the diabetes and the heart disease. You
yeah.
know, yeah.
Alright, next one. What's the biggest lie or misconception the fitness industry tells people about losing fat after 40?
Wow. Okay. The biggest lie is the calories in, calories out. That still perpetuates blows my mind. It's completely ignoring hormones. It's completely ignoring everything I just explained to you about insulin resistance. It
Yeah.
ignores insulin resistance, which is what 90% of the population is dealing with. So calories in, calories out, big fat lie.
Yeah. Well, and here's the interesting thing about it. I was actually thinking about this while I was shopping at the grocery store today, the calories in, calories out thing. It's like, yeah, it's good to know like the amount of energy or the units of energy in a food, the calories, the carbs, the fats, the proteins. Yeah, those are definitely
Yeah,
important. And I
I
think some
track all
people,
those. Yeah.
yeah, and I think people should track for sure for a period of time just to kind of get a good sense of like
Yeah.
what they're eating. But the reality of the situation is everyone's got different engines. People are going to burn calories. This is just my 2 cents. People
Mm.
burn calories at different rates based off where they're at. Someone that's like 600 pounds isn't going to burn calories like Usain Bolt. You know what I mean? Different people have different engines and you can increase calorie burning. Just tracking the calories, yeah, I feel like there's some truth to it, but the problem is it's different for everybody because people burn calories different. What are your thoughts on that?
One, food quality. It
Mm,
makes a difference. Two,
okay.
your engine, like you said, if you're insulin resistant, which most people are, you're not turning the food you're eating into ATP. You're storing it as fat. That's the thing. We do not have a closed system. We are not lawnmowers. All the gas you put in a lawnmower, for the most part, turns into energy in the engine.
Yeah.
All the food that you give to the human body, depending on what state they're in, disease state or athletic state, or the quality of food you're putting in, not all that turns into ATP. Some of it is just stored as fat because of the inefficiency of the metabolism of the oxidative stress going on in the the the, the metabolic process in those mitochondria, where you're being damaged, and so that energy is not turned into energy, cellular energy. It's just being stored as fat, and that's why they can be on 12, 15, 1600 calorie a day diets and still gaining weight, not losing weight, still diabetic. And as I mentioned before, the diabetic or the highly insulin resistant person is creating calories from their lean mass, even when they're not eating. And we see that with the dawn effect. When you have 200 blood sugar, right? 200 milligrams per
Mm-hmm.
deciliter blood sugar first thing in the morning, you haven't eaten for 8 hours. Good friend of mine, Brad Kearns, tells a story.
Oh
Brad
yeah.
Kearns, you know Brad is. I mean, he was
Yep.
a champion triathlete. He's now still competing at 60, track and field, wrote New York Times bestseller keto books, just wrote a book, Mark Sisson. The guy, when he was doing keto, was waking up to blood sugar of 130 milligrams per deciliter. Waking up, he hadn't eaten for 9, 10 hours. And when he did, it was keto. And
Yeah.
he's got a blood sugar of 130. Okay, that's elevated gluconeogenesis on a very healthy person.
Yeah.
Translate that to an insulin resistant, diabetic, obese person. It, don't tell me it's about the calories because their
Yeah.
blood sugar's through the roof and they haven't eaten any.
Well put. We didn't even get into, I might have to have you back on because one of the crazy parts about your Instagram is you're obviously a very, very in shape guy. You've graced the cover of Men's Fitness. We didn't even touch on that part. Top 10 exercises. So if you've got 10 exercises, and I'd like to ask this question to a lot of like the fitness guys that I
Uh-huh,
interview. You
uh-huh.
got 10 exercises that you can do for the rest of your life. They don't necessarily need to be in any specific order, but what are they for you?
Ooh, okay. Boy. I would go with a single leg. I'd work on a single leg squat for both the mobility and the movement. So like to the
Like a
floor, back
Bulgarian
up,
split
one,
squat or
one,
something?
one leg, or a pistol squat. Pistol
Okay.
squat, Bulgarian split squat, I would probably keep them both. And a pull up,
Hmm.
a wide row, overhead press, and I would do a cable or band driven dynamic band, driven chest press. Single arm.
Gotcha.
Single arm.
Okay.
Um,
I feel
what am
like
I at
that's
there?
six.
That's six, right?
Yeah.
Um, a plank,
For the abs specifically, or just core strength in general?
core strength and stability, and for flattening out that spine because so many of us are cranked forward from sitting too much, right?
Mm,
Pelvic, like so perfect pelvic and back stability. Then to get outside of those planes, I would do some sort of side lunge, like
okay.
deep side lunge, and a boy, you got me. Um, maybe I'm trying to think of what to do here. Reverse fly. Like a
Nice.
like to get open up the chest. Um, and then a dead hang.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, shoulder
Solid.
health, grip strength.
Paul Saladino's a big dead hang guy. I know he likes those.
Yeah, no, they're. Uh, I think there's a longevity component there and I'm thinking in terms of that has to be woven in with how we approach strength training is longevity and keeping um, our our stability and our agility, our ability to move in extreme ranges, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where we usually get hurt. Is in
Yeah,
that like that side lunge, stepping off a curb. You know, it's those things where we're a little bit outside of our normal plane of movement, and we get thrown off as we get older, and that's where we get injured.
totally.
So
100% agree. In terms of supplements, the one last one that I wanted to talk to you about. What are, in your opinion, are like the top maybe 3 to 5 supplements all men should be taking, or people in general? It doesn't have to be just men. It could be also be women. What are like the top 3 to 5 supplements that men should be taking?
Okay. Um, so what were the top ones? Well, the top ones would be, oh boy,
Like
I don't like.
creatine, are you a big creatine guy at all? Or like I know everyone's raving about creatine, all the studies that show all the positive benefits in terms of just the mental side of things, the body composition side of things in terms of performance. Are you not buying it?
I mean, I have it. I've
Mm-hmm.
used it off and on. My kids use it. My wife's used it. It's not like I don't think it's a bad supplement. I don't think it's a necessary supplement.
Okay.
I'm much more. I think sleep is the component of our. We've done diet and exercise to nearly death, and yet sleep still remains the big mystery. So anything we can do to help with improving our quality and tracking and understanding of sleep quality. Um, so my supplements are usually geared to things like a good magnesium glycinate or 3 and 8. And I do a little extra tryptophan and some GABA to help stimulate those GABA receptors for the melatonin production, which tends to diminish as we get older, and the GABA receptors, which tend to get a little dull.
Yeah.
Um, so my supplementation is geared more around um, basically putting myself in a more parasympathetic state for sleep. We get the sympathetic very easily, man. I mean, stress, right? Stimulation, the screens, work, kids, life puts us in sympathetic.
Yeah.
What we neglect is the parasympathetic. We seem to reach for substances to get us there, and I think there's lifestyle habits or things we can do, but there's some supplements which help that aren't real present in our diet anymore, and we might need more of just because the level of stress has increased. And for me, and I think for most of the men, because most of the men I train that are like well over 40, they're professionals. Their
Hmm.
sleep is the thing where they're like, man, I just can't. I slept like crap. I never sleep well. My deep sleep doesn't exist. HRV is like, it's like a metronome on speed, and so it's the magnesium, which is probably the lesser of all of them, but the tryptophan, the GABA, um, and 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 things that help reduce stress, cortisol, um, and help our bodies kind of get in that more relaxed state. That's where I lean. I think creatine is beneficial. I don't know that I would call it. I'm not convinced it's necessary for or as necessary as is being currently hyped. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
A
I
hundred
would need to
percent.
see more long-term data on the benefits to brain health. If it helps brain, yes, 100%. Um, but that's where I think um, those are things that I have a hard time replacing with my diet.
Hmm.
Is the magnesium, the tryptophan, the GABA, wherever those came from before, whether it was just our better paying more attention to sunset, not not
Yeah.
less fluorescent light, less stress, less
Get like your
screens.
circadian
It's your
rhythm like
circadian
on
rhythm,
point.
things
Yeah.
that feed our circadian rhythm and help us adjust. Those are the supplements I think where I would put more emphasis than anything else,
Gotcha.
because I think it's the biggest neglected part of our lifestyle. There's big three. There's diet, exercise, and sleep.
Yep.
And I think sleep is the most abused and neglected.
What would you say then on this notion of sleep then? What would be like your number one sleep hack? Like what's like the number one thing you do? I know we were talking about the supplements, but is it like cold room, special mattress? Like what would be your number one thing you do to optimize
I
your sleep?
I don't want to answer you this. I hate to answer you this way. We can't just do one thing. It's like I want to lose weight. I just want to do
Mm,
one thing.
yeah. Yeah, sure.
I just want to diet. I just
Yeah,
want to work out. And you're gonna go, that's not gonna work.
sure.
So if we just do one thing for something as important as sleep that we're supposed to do for like a third of our life, I mean, I don't.
Maybe there's a better way to ask that question. Maybe there's a better way, like, what's maybe one thing everyone can do what is the one thing everyone can implement that's easy for them to implement to improve sleep, like tonight when they go to bed? That might be the kind of the same question, but
It
a
is.
little
I
bit
mean,
different.
I'm gonna give you three that I tell people.
Sure.
Limit the fake light. So whether it's device light up close or fluorescent light, whether you blue light blockers, dim lights, change lighting 3 hours before bed. Don't eat your last meal, heavy meal, 3 hours before bed. Keep the room below 65 degrees. And those three things will help most people's sleep unless they're dealing with something like apnea,
Mm.
restless leg syndrome. I know those kind of things, but it's like those will improve the natural circadian rhythm more than most other lifestyle choices. So reduce the room temp, reduce your light exposure, reduce heavy food 3 hours before bed, and those three things will help your circadian rhythm. Um, what I have found that as I increase my carb intake, especially early in the day, that also reduced my cortisol, which then in turn helped my sleep. So it's what we do during the day that sets us up to have a better night's sleep at night.
Well put. Beautifully said. Zane, I mean, this is awesome. There's so many different things I want to talk to you about. So I got to get you back on here.
Sure. Happy
Where
to.
can people find you online, get in contact with you, work with you? And I'll put everything in the show notes, but feel free to drop whatever you'd like.
Well, thank you. Well, so I have a free download if people want that. It's like a quick, like a few page PDF of how I approach my clients. It's called Free 40 Plan. Free40plan.com is where you can find it. And basically, I look at diet, exercise, some elements of recovery, and even talk a little bit about, give some biomarkers for fasting. It's like metabolic biomarkers, hormone biomarkers. If you have some targets for hormone replacement therapy, something we didn't talk about either, but it give you some like optimal versus normal ranges. Your doctor might be
Mm.
looking at the normal ranges and you want the optimal ranges. So those are all in there. It's an easy resource for most people, but free40plan.com. You can find most of my socials at zanegriggs.com, but I'm most active on Instagram at Zane Griggs Fitness, and then YouTube I'm at Zane Griggs. So that'd be the easiest place to kind of pick me up.
Perfect. And like I said, I'll put everything in the show notes. So
Right.
yeah, Zane, appreciate the time. Thank you also too for giving me a little extra time here and diving into some of those last components like the sleep and stuff. I think that's going to be super valuable for people. And to everyone else
Thank you.
out there, yeah, thanks guys for listening to the Low Carb Consultant podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Max.